And the first is a home rule discussion, continuation from the prior workshop.
All right, we have a home rule discussion. Who is the leader of the pack on this one? Who did the brochure? Flyer, rather.
Mr. Tibbetts. Mr. Tibbetts?
Is anyone willing to speak about home rule?
Where's Rich? Oh, I thought we were waiting for Rich to talk.
Oh,
Yeah,
where is he? Mr. Tibbetts, your flyer, your topic. We nominated you as chairman of the Home Rule Committee. Let's go.
Well, I don't know really where this discussion will go, but first of all, I'd like to compliment Joe on his summary, I guess you would say. The memo that he wrote about home rule gives a good background and goes through some of the issues that municipalities are facing to get this done. It's a very difficult thing to pursue, and I know that. We all know that. And I guess, I don't know if you've all had a chance to really, think about the ins and outs of all this, but it is something that, in my opinion, is going to take a very concerted effort on the parts of everybody to pull this through. And I'm not convinced after our last discussion that the council has the appetite for that. I just got the impression that it was more of it's a good thing that we should be talking about this. I think we all know that it would help the city to have home rule. And I hope that some of the residents realize that this isn't something that we want to get involved in because it's a real difficult process to put ourselves through. It would require a lot of preparation and a lot of meetings and a lot of shaking the trees in order to try to let people know the why of why the city would benefit, not us personally, why the city would benefit from gaining the ability of home rule. And so I don't know how else to pursue it other than if you have things that you would like to talk about and questions or comments that we want to throw back and forth, fine. But I think the bottom line is, do we want to pursue this for the November election cycle? Do we as a council want to place this referendum on that ballot?
I am very hesitant about moving along the lines you suggest. The reason I say that is because at the last meeting, everyone here disavowed the issue of taking over as a chairperson for a group that's working on home rule. My suggestion is a little different. Why can't we get a consultant in here that does this kind of work, knows where to start, knows what to feed the grist mill, and knows where to finish could possibly be? I don't think any one of us, including me, could predict any of that.
No, I don't think so either, and that's why I gave you a copy of this. This was the flyer that the city sent out through the consultant that had hired in the last referendum. And this was a piece of mail that went out. Obviously, also, the newspapers in town supported us in our efforts to get home rule the last time. And I think they printed as much as they could as far as the reasons why it would help us. So there, all those things work together. But I agree with you. I think it would be helpful to have an independent body of some sort, if you want to call it, if we were to acquire a consultant to help us. But on top of all that, I've spoken with Wendy a few times, and she's spoken with people like the League of Women Voters who would help us have a meeting here and talk about it, and maybe have some people come in from U of I, perhaps would be able to provide somebody to come in and speak on the on the issues of home rule. So
I think that's more of a logical process in my mind. I talked to Arnie Gould. I said, Arnie, find us someone that is very familiar, has done, or whatever, the experience on home rule. We talked about Sid Mathias. We talked about Dave Harris. We talked about Elaine Neckrits, who's now a lobbyist. People that have better knowledge. to go out and say, okay, here's the flyer, we want you to vote for home rule. I don't think it's gonna make it. I think we need someone professional from the standard. Doesn't mean we're gonna pay someone. If we can get someone to help us, that would be good.
Yeah, that in tandem with the Citizens Committee and all the other tools that we have at our disposal for communicating the messages.
Yeah, and participation by the alderman, by the mayor, by elected officials in general. But I don't think anyone here is ready to say, I'm going to lead the charge on home rule.
Well, I don't
And
think
I'm
we-
going to tell you how to advertise it, I'm going to tell you where you spend your money and all that. We don't have anyone like that.
No, and I'm not proposing that any one of us should do that, because you could argue that we're too close to the fire on something like that. You need people that are somewhat knowledgeable and independent,
Right.
at a distance to see, how to coordinate all those tools.
We're having a discussion. Does anyone want to chime in? Yes, sir.
Rich, I agree with everything that you have just said, with the exception of putting it on the ballot in November. I think it's premature. I think, as we talked last time, we talked about having an education campaign, putting it, recurring factual information into a newsletter, into the e-news, into town hall meetings, and really letting people know what home rule is. In addition to that, parlaying what Alderman Ludwigson had said last time about this is what you have without home rule, this is what you could have with home rule. The monies that are being left on the table from different entities that we work with, completely outside of, any taxing body. The idea that we would eliminate the need for you to come in and grab, to buy city stickers, which of course benefits the city, because then we don't have anybody that's not buying city stickers. You don't have to go chasing them anymore. We don't have to pay a collections outfit. We can tap into the tourism district and, regain those, not even regain, but gain those dollars, because right now they're just going back to the hotels for advertising. Okay, well, that's a significant amount of money. So, Mayor, you're exactly right. Do I want to lead the charge? No, I don't want to lead the charge. I've led charges, and this is not one that I want to take the time to lead right now.
Well, you did well on the roads. Don't take that away from you. I wouldn't.
Thank you.
I was there.
But, I'm certainly along for the ride and happy to help, and, we'll do my part. But I do think that you do need to have basically, at minimum, a 12-month educational process so that people truly know what it is. It's very easy to say no to something you don't understand. Okay, so I think.
And I think people get misled by a lot of the same, groups that come out to lobby against home rule,
Oh, yeah.
and that don't even live in town. They, their only, dog in the fight is that they're afraid that the real estate market would be, in some ways.
Right, and of course, you start barking the word tax, and
Yeah.
everybody latches on to tax. I mean, at the end of the day, you live here, I live here, everybody else lives here, and nobody wants their taxes raised.
That's for sure.
So, that.
I see it as a way of not
But that's the
having
only
more
fight,
taxes.
but that's the only fighting, that's the only argument against it is the word tax
Yeah.
and property tax, and, to me, it's just not, it's an easy way to say no.
Oh, yeah.
Alderman Rosenthal.
Mr. Mayor, first of all, I thank City Administrator Wade for his memo. I think the last part of it, about eighth of it, is really what we've talked about, beginning with the paragraph, the seminar, he was reporting on a seminar. And I would endorse your concept of bringing in some kind of a professional. We need that kind of expertise and experience as to how you counter just what you said. We know the arguments but we're amateurs. We don't really know how to make it happen. And I am speaking for one who is in favor of it. I worked in the last referendum. Pretty good in our area, but it wasn't good enough to carry the city. But I certainly would get on board again. I like the idea, and I hadn't thought about the professional thing. Professional fundraiser, I think that's what you're talking about.
Basically,
That
yeah.
does that. This is where we need to go, because we need somebody just riding herd on this thing all the way. And we as the council, we're individual members, we have other responsibilities to the city, and our responsibility as members of the council is enough already for us. But we need that pro there to be able to tell us what to do.
You know,
I don't know how much that pro costs, but, you know, that's another
Yeah,
thing.
I'm saying I'm looking for help from people we know that should know what home rule is all about.
Right.
I know I mentioned this to a Payless group not too long ago, and they said the first thing you don't do is go to social media. Well, you know, everybody said, oh, you know, you can advertise, you can talk, and he said, you'll get killed, because all the guys out of it will come out of the woodwork that are against
Right.
it, and they'll get much more people with them than you will. So that's one thing I never thought of. So there's more to it than that, but that's one issue that,
That's a passive
Right.
approach, and it's a negative approach,
yeah.
that type of approach.
So if we can find someone, I'd like to start with the politicians we know. I was with Julie Morrison the other night. She's a senator from the rich people's side over there. And I talked to her about it. And if we talk to people that know what home rule is, that's number one. And what it can do. You know, when you talk about city stickers have to bring income, right? But where's that income gonna come from? Wheeling doesn't have city stickers.
No.
Well, guess what? I think Alderman Ludwigson said it at one point. It's in their taxes. It's on their budget, come in by taxes. So there's a lot to juggle, and you can't lie to people. No.
No.
It's got to be approached in a positive manner, and I don't know how to do it. So that was my suggestion. Alderman Ludwigson?
How many times have we done this? 3 times so
3
far?
times.
Yeah.
I don't think that disseminating the facts either way, whether you can tax or can't tax, how much money we take in from different things, I think most people understand that and get that. That's really easy to do. It's an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper that you can put all that info on. What passes home rule or doesn't pass home rule is what the people think is going on in their unit of government. If they believe that Prosper Tights is acting responsibly and is doing a good job, and that this really is for the best, and they understand what's good about home rule and what's bad about home rule, and they're willing to accept that, it passes. But, you know, I mean, there were just as many people out there trying to scare people the last time out as there was the first 2 times, and each time it got closer and closer. I think we have an obligation to at least run it every 2, 3, 4 years, because at some point, I wouldn't want people to say, well, why didn't you do something when the economy starts to turn again, and now we don't have the money we had before, and we have all this money we lost that we never collected.
That's exactly why I
Year
brought
after
it up
year.
now, because I wanted to get the discussion going, and I think you're exactly right.
I think we should have it on our board out front here. You know how they have that debt clock of how big it is? Have it going the other way. You know, what would we have had since the last home rule in money, and keep
Oh, my
rolling it
God.
forward and saying,
That's,
look how much, look
That's
what we
interesting.
lose by not doing it. To me, it's an easy decision, but to convince the people, you're not gonna convince them by telling them all the good things about it. You'll only be able to convince them if they feel that what we're doing is best for the city and best for the long run. I mean, the facts are what they are. Home rule hasn't changed since the last time we ran it. It's still the same set of guidelines or requirements of the state, just whether people think that it's being done for the right reason.
right.
But I would help with it, but I would not want to be the point person. And who was the person? We used somebody named, who? Seraphin, that was it.
Sheriff is one of the more high-priced guys. You know, he does all the big stuff.
Did he was that the roads or was that the
Home rule.
Home rule?
What?
Yeah, he's a he used to be a TV,
I sent you the thing about that.
I worked.
no, but he used to be a, didn't he used to be like
I
a
didn't even know he
reporter or something like
existed.
that, or
I don't know.
a long time ago?
Was he?
I don't know. Maybe I was low down on the totem pole. I don't know. Because I worked on home rule, but never met the guy, never heard of him.
Sheriffman does a lot of
Really?
work for him, and he does a lot of PR work for us.
If I
And
could make,
he's on TV a lot. I mean, he's a high-priced guy.
I just wanted to add a comment, noting on what Alderman Williamson said. I think this November might be premature. I think it's a long process to get a real education out to people, to have them thoroughly understand all that's involved. And I agree, if we could get some outside help with that, that would be excellent. But I think something like this, if you put it on a ballot time and time again, I think the likelihood of it passing goes down, not up. So I think it's better to take the time to get everyone educated, take our time to go through that thorough process, and then put it out there to people. But to just do it time and time again, I don't know that that's a wise thing to do. I think it's better to just take our time and do this properly, and I agree with the mayor's suggestion to get some outside help on it.
Keep asking questions. Tom Rooney has where is that, Karen, on Friday or something? Where's Rooney's event?
It's in
In
Mount
Arlington Heights, at
Mount Prospect.
Peeps or something, what's the name of it?
Peak, Mount Prospect,
Prospect.
Peak.
Peep. I keep, I keep going to these things and shaking hands, and, Tom's a good friend of ours here, former Rolling Meadows mayor, and now took Murphy's place as a senator. There's people out there, and they will help. Dave Harris, I thought, did fine with us. Lane Eckert's a Democrat, I think she did fine with us. So there are people out there that will help, and I'll keep talking to them, and if you can, if you know somebody, doesn't matter, somebody that could help, talk. Get the word out. We need help, and we need help from you, Tom, whatever.
My thought was that perhaps this topic should be put to the Strategic Directions Committee for continuous review. And if we're going to be serious about trying to form an educational platform, that maybe that would be the place for it to, be occupied by at this point in time. If we're not going to put out a referendum this year, I mean, it's going to take time to organize everything and get things going. What do you think about that?
Rich, I think that's kind of just pushing it to another committee to have more discussions, to come back to council. I think really, from an educational standpoint, I think that the information can still come from the staff. Is that correct, Joe?
Sure.
Okay. Really, I think that we need to decide as a group. I think everybody said they're on board, short of Laura. I didn't hear, I don't know what her opinion was. In fact, I don't think she was here for the last discussion, was she?
Yes, she was.
She was?
She was.
Okay. But, go ahead, chime in.
Well, I sense a consensus, and it's a sense of a consensus, based by the conversation, that we should move ahead with, first of all, identifying a professional. And that professional then could come and talk to us. We can make a decision as to what we want to do. And give that authority to be the manager of this thing going forward. And we got to plan for it on a 12-month lead up to whenever the vote is. November is unrealistic, totally unrealistic, because you're not going to get the information out. The information that goes out is going to sit there, people are going to look at it, there's not going to be anything. You want to be at a situation where they've, from a promotional point of view, that they've heard it again, they've heard it again and again, and they get to the point where they say, just vote on it already, I'm for it, I've heard enough of it already. That's the kind of reaction you want. And you do that by repeating and repeating and repeating. It's not a 6-month operation.
And I think that really you need the professional that you're talking about,
The mayor's talking, it was the mayor's suggestion.
the professional that
Yeah,
anybody that
yeah.
we're talking about, to kind of opine on what that duration should be, you know, what election you should be going after, because I think there's a strategy to that, because, you know, if you go to a primary, you're not gonna get as much turnout as you would to the general election. I think the general election comes in March. March, the general election?
November?
November.
yeah.
No, November's primary, isn't it?
No,
No.
No.
Governor's is November.
Okay. And then we have another election.
You'd have about 2 years
March.
after that. The
We have a
presidential
local
election,
in March.
the presidential election would be 2 years from November.
Right.
That would be a big
That's
turnout.
the big.
But there's a consolidated election, which is next spring.
Next spring is a
Then there's a primary election, which is a year later, and then a general election in the fall. So there's
Yeah.
one every year, but it's just every other year, whether it's a primary or a consolidated.
Okay, but I think we need, you know, I hate to say that there's people smarter than us, but I think we need people smarter than us to tell us, you know, that have been through this process before, to tell us what directions to take. And I, you know,
Totally.
I don't want you to feel like you're being attacked if you're standing up.
Oh, I don't feel like that, I don't feel that
Okay.
way at all.
Yeah,
I think that everybody's had some good input, and I think
No.
that we need somebody to give us.
This is the most conversation I've heard about it in 4 years.
you know, I
Well, that's
agree,
good.
I agree with everything that all of you are saying. I mean, I think it makes sense to have a professional, somebody who, I mean, it could be it could be someone like David Harris or Elaine Neckritz or Rooney, or, I mean, there's so many people who do know. But what I'm concerned about is this is kind of a deja vu back from 4 years ago. Everybody thought it was a great idea to pursue an advocate home rule, and then the ball got dropped, and now we're back, and November is the next election where you would have enough people that it would make sense to put on a referendum, otherwise you're waiting 2 more years. You know, I don't know, you know, whether 6 months is enough or it's not enough. I mean, it all really, what always ends up is there's always a situation where you get revved up, and the 4, 5, 6 months before is really when you do all the main work. Now, I've spoken to the League of Women Voters. They said they could support us. They would be willing to do a dinner or luncheon, to have people come. You know, we could do some other fundraising on our own as well. But, I mean, I guess my concern is that I just wonder if this is ever going to get off the ground. I mean, you know, 4 years ago it was the same thing, and look at all the money every year we're losing. We just lose another 2 years of $750,000 a year. I mean, is that what we're talking about? I mean, it doesn't make sense. I mean, I understand why you don't want to push it right now, but I think all in all, what's going to end up is if we do pursue this, it's going to be the last 4 or 5 months that it's going to really be on the road and really active, and because that's what it takes. It doesn't take 2 years to get people excited. It's going to take 4 or 5 months of continuous pushing and getting it done. Now, do we have enough time? It's going to be tight, I agree. And I'm not saying we have to do it, but, I mean, it just seems like we've been just going round and round in circles and not going anywhere with us. It just, I don't know, I have a concern about that. I mean, I agree we should have professionals. I agree we do need to have a lot of promotion, but, I mean, I'm just not sure that 2 years from now this is going to be any different. And, you know, I'm not seeing anybody really making any effort to do anything.
All right, Alderman Rosenthal?
First, I have a question for legal counsel. Educate me again, I guess, as to when we can have these elections, the referendum, when we can place the referendums on the ballot.
So
referendum on
the
ballot.
deadline for the November election is August 6th of this year.
But no, I didn't ask the question correctly.
Oh, how
What
often?
types of elections, when we have voting, are there certain ballots we can certain times we can put it on? Can we only put it on the consolidated? Can we only put it on the midterms? Can we put it on the presidential?
It's
Do
the
we have
next.
restrictions?
It's the statute says that, it's the next, let me read it. It will be submitted to referendum in the next regular election. So there's no restriction in terms of consolidated or general, consolidated or primary. The Board of Elections has an election schedule, so you can put the question on any one of the regularly scheduled elections.
So that means consolidated, means primary, means general.
Right. So the next one would be the November election. The following election, I believe, is in the spring, April. And so you can do it in any of those
So
regularly
it's
scheduled
not a
elections.
2-year wait time.
Well, you would want it to be in a general election to get the most people who are going to come out and vote. You would want a general election.
I would want a pro to tell me that.
I don't think you need a pro to tell you that.
I think
it's
you do.
common sense. Very few people vote in the primaries or in the consolidated elections, very few. You need to get the people out, and you're not going to get them out except for a general election.
I think the question we need to ask to get ourselves moving is, do we want to have a pro involved? And if so, how do we go about getting that pro?
Well-
I defer to you on that, Mr. Mayor.
Let me, give me some more time. I've been working on it. I haven't really gotten any solid answers, but maybe by the next meeting we have, I can give you more definitive information.
Okay.
Okay, because I do have several people I've mentioned it to, I'll get back to you and that kind of stuff. But I do have one company that wants to do it, but I'm not too sure that they've had a lot of experience doing it. I didn't see that portion of.
You didn't see the
resume.
track record.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So, I'll get you more definitive reaction from the people I talk to at the next meeting we have, which is at the end of the month.
If I could just ask, I would actually like other people's opinion. From what I have seen, it seems like this is roughly a year-long process, from what I've heard. Do people feel that a year is more than enough time, or do they, as was mentioned, it could be done in 5 or 6 months? To me, that seems like really rushing it. I don't know, people don't want to wait 2 years. In other people's opinion, what do we think is a reasonable time frame to get this done thoroughly and done right, as far as the education process?
Well, Alderman Ludwigson, I think, hit it, and that is the people have to trust who's in power, let's call it, who's in the office. And we've got an election coming up that may change who's in the office. And the answer I got the last time we ran this thing was, well, yeah, you guys are okay, but what about the next group? Are they going to tax willy-nilly and so on and so forth? I'd like to have a solid group that has 4 years coming, that could be said to be dependable, they're going to be there, they're the right people, and so on. This fall, I think, is way too soon. Anyone else want to chime in?
I guess my only comment, I agree that this is rushed, it's tight, but usually the push is is 3, 4, 5 months. When you're doing these things, it doesn't go 12 months. It very rarely does. So I don't know, I'm not an expert. Maybe we need the expert to give us some assistance on that issue. But I mean, again, we're looking like we're going to wait 2 more years if we don't do it in November.
Just a point I'd like to clarify. I don't know if Alderman Rosenthal knows this right now or not, but I guess we can run this election at any given point in time, but we still have a 2-year waiting period if we want to run it again. So there has to be a 2-year gap in between whatever election.
But we have that gap already. That
We
gap
do.
already exists.
Absolutely.
So we can pick any election coming forward that we want.
That's true. The only thing is that if we ran it in the fall, and I'm not saying we should, but I'm saying if we did, that we couldn't run it again until 2 years went by.
I understand that.
Okay.
It's 2 years, you got a 2-year hiatus.
That's right.
But we've already passed the hiatus.
That's right. We can't go backwards, unfortunately. So,
All right, I think we've done it. Can we move on to the second?